everybody, No Dodger here. We are back in automation. We're going to start something a little different today. A couple months ago I did a little mini-series about Japanese motor recreations. That was something that I really wanted to do because the 90s Japanese motors and cars had a big impact on my life. It's what I spend most of my free time working on. But although a lot of support out there for that little mini-series, and I appreciate that, had a lot of requests to do maybe some motors of different eras and certainly of different, countries and manufacturers. I would say the most requested would be some of the American, muscle car engines and V8s and stuff like that, which is something that I'm familiar with. My dad's always been into like Chevys, and we used to go to Super Chevy car shows and stuff like that. So I grew up around cars like that, and I've always had a pretty good appreciation for basically anything with wheels and a motor. So it's certainly not as if I am against those kind of motors. I just don't have as big of a knowledge base with them. So over the past month or so, I've been collecting pages and pages of information on motors because I want to do a similar thing to what I did last time and kind of take you through a little bit of the history of some of the more famous motors. What I want to start with is the most iconic. When you think of an American motor, you're pretty much going to think of a small block Chevy. It's just the most famous and the most common American muscle car motor there is. The thing about them is there's tons of them. There's 50 to 100 different variations. I've kind of narrowed it down into a few of specific eras that I thought were like the most groundbreaking, or ones that were the most popular. So let's start a new engine. And what we're going to start with will be a engine from 1967. So we got to go way back here. Lots of clicking to do. We're going to start with the L48, which is the, oops, too far, quote-unquote original 350 Chevy. So that is a V8 cast iron block. Now let's see. It is a 101.6. This was a little hard to get because it's obviously in inches for everything basically connected to these motors. So it is a 101.6 millimeter by, which is 4 inches. That's kind of what makes a small block Chevy, is that 4-inch bore. But let's see, the stroke. The stroke is, I think, 88.4. Let's see. Yep. See, that is 4 by 3.48 inches. So 4 inches by 3.48 inches. This motor is obviously the most simple. So we're just gonna have a cast iron crank, cast con rods, and cast pistons. Not a very high revving motor or anything, so that shouldn't be an issue. Hopefully we don't run into any issues there with the bottom end. If we do, we have a little bit of wiggle room in the quality slider there, but I'm going to leave everything 0 to start with. On the top end, push rod. If it's a small block Chevy, odds are it's push rod. There's only one exception, and we will get there later on, possibly at the end of this episode. But to start out with, push rod, 10.4 to 1 compression. That kind of varied quite a bit throughout the history of this motor, but we're going to go with the Mac Daddy, the top of the line of the L48s, which had a 10.4. Cam profile, that's another wiggle room one, so we'll leave that at 40 to begin with, and we'll change that as needed. Valve covers are pretty similar to that. Finned would be probably the best. And is there an orange? Yeah, that seems about right, the orange one. Aspiration, obviously naturally aspirated. It's a carburetor with a 4-barrel. So this is the first build of ours in any of the episodes I've done, I believe, with a carburetor. So there's something. Single carburetor. We'll put a standard air cleaner on there. This era, I'm gonna say it was running probably regular leaded. Could be super leaded. I'll bump up to super only if needed though. Fuel mix and run it kind of rich. And we'll leave ignition timing at 50 for now and adjust that as needed. The red line, it's another iffy thing. Red line was a little less controlled in this era. No computers or anything like that, but there was definitely some limitation through a distributor or through timing, ignition timing. What I've seen is about 5200. It could be a little higher than that, could be a little lower than that. So I'm going to adjust that as well according to how it survives. If it's having bottom end issues, I will drop that a little bit. We're making max power in the motor that I want to build at 4800 RPM, so I don't need that high of a rev band. We'll put short cast headers on there, and we'll do a true dual with about a 2 1/4 exhaust pipe. No cats because we are running leaded, and we'll do reverse flow mufflers. So as I said, the power comes at 4800, and what we want to make is 295 horsepower, but 380 foot-pounds of torque. So very torquey motor. So let's give that a first test through, and we'll see where we land. Those noises tell me we're gonna land with a whole bunch of knock. Fuel octane 94.5. That's leading me to believe that we're probably gonna need to go for super leaded. Let's see, 94.5. Okay, so I need to bring. How could we get that down a little bit more? More fuel, but it's gonna start to run rich. Lower AKA I off of timing, so we can take some timing away. A little bit more cam profile, but that comes with a price too, in that we need more torque than power for this to be correct. So that might need to change. Well, it looks like it may still be knocking, but it looks like it at least survives. 330 on torque, 242, and a big kablooey. That was a very dramatic explosion. Engine has failed to valve float. Okay, so our fuel octane 93.4. We are still a little bit above this. It definitely sounded like it was running rich though, so I don't want to get too carried away there. So I'll take a little bit more timing and maybe go one click down on the fuel mix. It sounded like we were getting too much valve float and it was eating up the top end, so we're going to limit it down to about 4900, and let's see if that improves anything. Okay, so the two things I see, we're still getting valve float, but we have this massive drop off in power, so what I may end up doing is going all the way down to 4800. There's not really much I can do about that besides bump up the quality of the heads so that maybe we get a little bit better survivability on the top end. We're still running rich, and we don't have enough octane, so it's knocking. So back off on the fuel mix and back off on... Actually, I'm going to go up on the cam profile a hair, because we were definitely losing too much power up top. I kind of had a feeling this was going to be one of the most difficult engine recreations I've done. It's certainly proving to be that so far. That was a very good improvement though, 275 horsepower and 359 foot-pounds of torque, and we're still running rich. So let's go up again on the cam profile and go down again on the fuel mix. This may be too much, but we shall see. I'm just going to do a quick test. Nope, good on fuel octane. 280 horsepower, 357 foot-pounds of torque. I would be more okay with this torque being low, because that 380 number seemed a little bit high to me, and I did get some varying numbers. Like I said, there's so many variations of this engine that the numbers are kind of shaky. And think about how accurate numbers, horsepower and torque numbers were in 1967, so keep that in mind as well. We're going to put a performance intake on there and see if maybe we can get a little bit of that power back. Not too much, only gained 2 horsepower and a little tiny bit of torque. Let's try a more aggressive cam profile. Okay, so there's 290 horsepower. We're only now 5 short. Still, that drop off is still killing me a little bit. So I'm gonna do. We're still within reason on material cost and man hours. So I'm gonna go bump up the fuel system tank a little bit. Let's see where that gets us. Gets us with a nice aggressive sounding idle, that's for sure. No real improvement. We're still dropping dramatically after 4400, and still just a hair short on the power. So our octane is down to 92.4, which means we could probably get some of this timing back, which might help. Let's do a quick test there. Did help. Did it help both? No, it just helped with power. So let's go a few more clicks on that till we exceed our mark. Actually, there's 296 horsepower, so that's enough horsepower. The torque is a little short, but 370, that's closer than I thought we were going to get. MTBF is decent. It could definitely be better. If we increase that bottom end, I believe that is where... Yeah, there's 49,000. That's at least a little bit better. So material cost still under 1,000. 39 man hours. That's quite a few, so that makes it pretty pricey. But the year and everything that I had to do to get these numbers to be correct, I kind of expected the cost or the man hours to be a little too high. But I think I'm going to be happy with that. That is what would be found in like a C3 Corvette, and is probably one of the most used and recognizable motors in American car culture. So this is the L48 350 Chevy. So now we have one big Chevy American V8 mixed in with our multitude of Japanese small 4-cylinders. But now we've got to move on. We've got to progress. Things did start to finally start moving again. Obviously, there was a big fuel crisis in the States in the 70s and through the 80s. That really hurt how V8s and any engines of that era progressed. So it was a while before another kind of iconic, well-used and high-output V8 was made. and that was another 350 Chevy, and that was the LT1. So once again, V8. It's gonna sound like a broken record eventually. The year 1992. This is considered the second generation of the 4.0 bore 350 Chevys. So this was like the revival of this motor. So we have the same 4-inch bore. Oops, we're gonna cast iron there. 4-inch bore, which is 101.6. And then the same stroke at 88.4. That gives us our same cubic inches. The bottom end, pretty much the same. No massive development there, except that it came with a hyper-eutectic cast piston. Let's see, the top end, still push rod. 2 valves per cylinder, but we have aluminum heads, which is good and bad. They flow a little better, they're much lighter. But you get that whole cast iron and aluminum block setup, which is a little problematic, so we will see a lower MTBF. And if you know anything about LT1s, you know head gaskets are an issue, and you better get good at fixing them. So, so that's that. Same 10.4:1 compression. Cam profile, we're going to go up again, and we'll start with 50. This is not that drastically different of a motor versus the old L48. We'll go with the plain valve cover there, and maybe the fins. You couldn't really see them, but the black fins work. This motor was featured in such things as the Camaro of the era, the C4 Corvette, and it was well known to be halfway buried under the firewall and pretty much everything it was in. So you don't get to see a whole lot of the valve covers, but they were black with fins. Aspiration NA. Fuel system. It is electronically fuel injected with a multi-point EFI. Not exactly like this, but it had more of just a plain square intake that had runners off of that. But did have every cylinder did have an injector. This definitely is a more modern intake design, but we'll have to live with that. We'll put a standard intake on there, which will cover it up, which works just fine since it doesn't exactly look right. Premium unleaded, so he's running on 91 octane, 90.3 should be close enough. Fuel mixture will go up to a 13.3. We'll go back off on the timing. Factory rev limit was 5,700. I foresee this being an issue, but we'll see how that works out. We'll go with a short cast header. Dual exhaust with a 2 1/4. That worked pretty well for us last time. I'll do 3-way cats. It probably could have been 2-way in that era, but we'll give it 3-way to try and give it a chance of making the power we need. And we'll do a straight through and reverse flow on the mufflers. Okay, so what's it supposed to do? 300 horsepower at 300 horsepower at 5,000 RPM and 330 foot-pounds of torque at 4,000. So you notice a big swing in the power there. Not a whole lot more power, but a lot less torque, and the power is coming on a little later. And that is partially due to the new EFI systems, more stringent fuel economy and emissions specifications, and we're switching over from leaded fuel to unleaded fuel. So a lot has changed in these 20 years, separating these motors. So to get these kind of numbers was actually a really big deal in 92. So let's see how close we are. Alrighty, so 351 foot-pounds, 311 horsepower, no valve float. That's amazing. But we've got the year up, so, you know, technology has gotten better on how to build stuff like that. The problem is we're making too much darn horsepower and a little bit too much torque as well. So what we can do then is back off, probably on the cam profile. So let's go back to about a 42 there. Give that a quick run. Now we're knocking, so that was too much. Still knocking. That's okay, we can come off of the timing a little bit as well. Let's see, that's 90.3. That's 90, okay, so there's 291 horsepower, 344 foot-pounds, so still a little bit too much torque. A massive fall off at the top end, which is to be expected, especially with a push rod setup. 5,000 RPM is perfect, so that's good. Might go one click up on the cam profile. Let's see where that gets us. 293, so let's just inch up to that. 296, probably gonna end up like one off, right? 299, yeah, I kind of expected that to happen for some reason. But 299, can we just do some trickery with maybe the fuel system to get the extra horsepower? Nope. It says no, you cannot trick me. Come on, 1 horsepower, that's all we want. About 1 degree of timing. 303, too far. 297, too far. I don't think this is ever gonna end. 302. 297. I think I was happier with the 299. 303, and then one click off here, I think is where I was at. Yeah, 299. So, this is really, I think, an important engine in the whole era of American V8s, because it started a bit of a turnaround, a revival of this engine, because in the 80s, they kind of become a joke. You had these huge, you know, obviously we haven't even touched the big block stuff, but you had these huge, like 400 cubic inch engines that were making 190 horsepower and stuff, and crazy numbers like that. So this was a small, compact engine that was lighter weight because you had the aluminum heads. It had the modern fueling system with the E5, and it was more efficient and with fewer emissions running the catalytic converters. So although it's not the most loved engine out there because of the more modern engines that have made it obsolete, I think it was definitely a big turning point in American motor technology. So there we have the Chevy small block LT1. Not to be confused, there was a previous motor that was an LT1, but that was more of a specialty high performance motor back in the day. So this is more of a important motor to me because it was way more popular. They put it in everything, and it had more actual like advancements, and it helped kind of revive the Chevy small block. So there we go. That's a start. Only 2 engines in. We have a whole bunch more to go just on the Chevy side. We still have to go through obviously the Ford and the Mopar stuff. And I'm not going to end this series just with V8s either. I want to get into the nitty-gritty and go through some other important American motors, including maybe some American motors, if you know what I mean. But I think that's going to do it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed. Hope I didn't mess anything up too much. Like I said, this is not as common knowledge to me. I have had to do a lot of research, so feel free to correct anything I've done, and I will go back and fix it. But we can kind of just go through this little trip down memory lane together. So, as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.